Because I have so much extra, I'm doing the top of the deck rim. Usually I wouldn't do this, but because I have extra, I'll use it up. I don't care as much right now getting 100% coverage on the top, really, just because if you miss a spot you can see it easy and get it later. I end up doing multiple epoxy jobs to completely seal up the deck. Because we'll have to clean up the top edge afterwards, clean up the bottom edge, in case some of the mat sticks down. Okay, so now time to start clamping. So I'm putting down wax paper anywhere there's going to be a kind of a clamp, like directly in contact with the epoxy. You can see you can either clamp from the inside or the outside. This time it doesn't really matter. I want to make sure the top edge is staying flush with the deck. A little bowed up right here. Do like a clamp or something. Okay. Keep going. Some of the mat's kind of like squeezed out. Sometimes you can get the mat to work, but sometimes it's kind of difficult. Really not the end of the world. Now we're getting to the fun area up in the bow. Note to self, it's a good thing to make sure your clamps fit through. Swap that one. I think this has gone pretty well. Just kind of putting some finishing clamps on because I can. Oops. The main thing you really pay attention to is making sure the deck is staying flush with the top edge. Now if it's not perfect, it's okay. You'll end up just kind of trimming it down so it is flush. This is going pretty well. You can see the thing's pretty much covered with clamps. One thing you notice is I haven't put clamps going like this to kind of squeeze the edge, because the hull kind of naturally is the right beam, so I could put clamps there, but then you might end up with a lumpy side. And because of the mat, it's really not a huge issue. One issue I'm having is that the lower pieces are pulling it up too much. So we gotta swap. I'm gonna swap so it's only putting pressure on the top edge. Help pull it up a little bit. It's pretty good. Put some more courtesy clamps on. I think it's pretty good. Alright, just check the beam. This boat, the beam is it's about 8 3/16. Looks like it's right on, so I don't really need to squeeze in the sides. Okay, so now I'll just kind of show the whole thing. You can see there's alternating pieces that hold the deck flush with pieces that squeeze the two layers together. There's the bow. What I did, I went up and down and kind of just checked to make sure the edge was just right. So now you just kind of hope the epoxy kicks appropriately, and let it dry overnight, and then see how much stuff you gotta fix. Looks like the epoxy cured well. It's dry, which is good. So soon there'll be time to remove all the clamps. First, I did want to point out that this is another step where if you don't cut the hull out beforehand, you can kind of see how difficult it would be to get the deck set in. Now some people do it, but if you notice, I mean, the majority of my clamps are going through the side of the hull. So there's an option where you could get the clamps on the inside, but you can see it'll be a lot more cluttered. Here's the boat with the clamps removed. See, the deck came out pretty nice. There'll be some cleanup to do, so you can see where the some of the mat came out. Really not a huge deal, just hit that with the Dremel pretty quickly. And also clean up the underside where the mat's hanging down a little bit. But overall, all that work put in the long epoxy job, it's definitely worth it, because the deck rim's almost done, and this is a major step that really kind of facilitates the rest of the build moving forward. So now what I'll do is I'll just use a Dremel cutoff wheel, and I will trim this top edge and then the underside. And I'll identify any gaps between the wood and the fiberglass that have to be filled in. I just trim the hull down flush. Both above and below the deck rim, or the underside, rather. I did this basically just by running the top of the cutoff wheel along the hull. Overall, the deck was pretty level with the top of the hull, and just ground down until I was getting contact on both the fiberglass and the wood. So you can see why I kind of didn't really care about getting full coverage of the top side, because a lot of this is ground up. It will get sanded down before I put a finish coat on the top. See, I also put the deck pieces in. They lined up really well with the holes, which is good. Means the screws that are kind of acting as studs are pretty straight. This back piece I'll have to trim the edges a little bit to get it to fall in. Not a huge deal. So the next step is kind of looking along the edge for any gaps, and specifically any gaps like this one right here that kind of goes through. So we'll want to fill those in. To do that, you can either tape the top edge here, flip the hull over, and then pour in epoxy from the inside. That's good because the ribs don't get in the way. Or you can tape it from the underside and then pour from the top. Probably end up doing both either way, whether you do from the underside first or from the top first. And then you can see here, see the daylight in there, so we'll want to seal that up. So kind of seal in all the gaps around the tube here, and then I'll cut the tube off flush with the top of the hull, and you'll get a nice clean pump outlet like that, which is pretty neat. The downside of taping the underside is that you won't really get a great seal where the ribs are, because you can kind of fold it, you can fold it along, but where the ribs are is going to be an issue. To help identify where the gaps are, I'll actually use a flashlight, and you can kind of see the light shining through there. These other areas where it's not as clear, so you can tell where the gaps are. So wherever there's a gap, I'll just put electrical tape over the outside edge there and seal it up. I ended up just taping the entire edge just because it was easier. It gives me more assurance that epoxy won't leak through. I think that's what I did in the past once I thought about it. And then the thing I really care about is getting the pump outlet sealed up. So now, with the hull flipped over, I'll just use an acid brush and just put epoxy right in that edge. So you can see this is another thing that, if I didn't cut the hull out, would be much more difficult. Show the general technique here. Sort of get the epoxy on the brush and just get it behind the ribs. Pretty simple, and it works really well with that tape on the top edge. I finished the epoxy job from the underside. Came out pretty good. You can see the I guess the darker spots there where epoxy came through. Sealed up the top edge most of the way, but there's still a few locations where I didn't get that well. So I'll put some tape on the underside here and then go from the top. And then I also still have to get, so you can see the pump outlet, it filled in underneath, but I'll need to fill that top part up. At this point I'm also going to install some deck magnets on these forward pieces, on the middle and the forward piece. I use rare earth magnets. Specifically that size. I think it's 8mm. What I do is I drill with a nice brad point bit, and then I just kind of, with the deck in place, just drill through, and then I'll kind of like press the magnets into the hull. So you can see like that magnet right there. There's a corresponding one on the deck piece. So you see on Congo I used a few of them. So far I have not had one of those magnets pull out. I know other people trying similar things have had magnets pull out, but I think with the brad point bit you get a very clean hole. And I'll actually, to get the magnets in, I'll actually use some channel lock pliers to press it in. The last step on the deck rim was coating it with a layer of epoxy to seal it up, and that is complete. You can kind of see how nice and shiny it is. Nice smooth layer on top, so it's all sealed up. So I'll wrap it up for this video. In parallel I've been working on the deck pieces, but I'll kind of handle that as a separate topic. So getting the deck in, or the deck rim is a really major step. Definitely one of probably the biggest milestone of the build. Really enables a lot of other steps moving forward, and it's always nice because it starts to look more like a ship than just a empty hull. So hope this video is useful. Thanks for watching.